So, Rich Cooper, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. You've written the book, The Unplugged Alpha, and it's a favorite of mine. I've read it twice. One of the things I loved about it was actually the start of it, when you talked about your own story and what it means to unplug and how you arrived at your own unplugging. So, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about that story.
Well, it's a three-part story. I had three events in life that sort of red-pilled me, I guess. One was the divorce. The second one was dealing with legislative changes that basically changed the entire way we were running our debt relief business here in Canada. And the third one was, I guess, being betrayed by a single mommy that I was dating after I got divorced. And I guess the realization comes at some point with men, for me, it was a little bit later in life, that things aren't what you were told they were. And these surprises that, I suppose, betray your safe world theories, your ego investments that you create in, your head, like, if you do certain things, everything will be just fine, come to awaken you and unplug you, right? So when I got divorced, the first part of the story was my understanding of love and marriage in the world today was you get married, okay, awesome. And if things don't work out, you just untie the knot and you're done with it. But that wasn't true. A 20-minute conversation with my lawyer, when I told him that I was thinking about getting divorced, revealed to me how the deck was stacked up against me. It was against all odds, basically. It was like, you don't want to go to court, you're going to lose. Basically, he essentially said, if you have the penis, you're going to lose. And I thought to myself, wow, that's interesting, because I thought men and women were equal and we were all treated the same. But that clearly wasn't true. And that was a 1.5 to 2-year battle. Then there were some legislative changes that the government was introducing vis-a-vis the credit card companies and the banks, basically the financial institutions that we were settling debt with. I had, and I still have, a credit card debt relief company that I founded 20 years ago. My brother now runs it. And there was changes that were introduced to the government by very wealthy financial institutions, banks, credit card companies alike in Canada, because we were saving people a lot of money. And they persuaded the government to essentially insert language into the legislation that would have delayed our first revenue event by essentially 8 months and cut it by about a third. I don't know if many of your viewers are business owners, but if you delay your first revenue event by 8 months and cut your revenue by a third, you're pretty much out of business. So the plan wasn't really to protect consumers as they purported in the legislation. The plan was to put the industry out of business completely. So there was that. I thought, the government would do the right thing and protect the consumer and make sure Canadians had good access to debt relief options, but they went with protecting the profits of the banks and credit card companies. And I guess the third and last thing was, of course, getting red-pilled essentially on women, because, my entire life, I never really had a problem attracting women. It's pretty easy for me. It's just dealing with them on a long-term basis, I guess, translating that to retaining them, always seemed to be a challenge as sort of time went on. Desire would sort of wane and problems would come up and you wouldn't know how to deal with them because you were told to always do the right thing as a man. And that clearly didn't work, because that 3-year relationship ending in her cheating on me and, leaving me basically upside down. So that's what sort of set me down this rabbit hole of self-improvement, getting questions answered that I wasn't really getting answered in a way that I thought was reasonable from other traditional sources, sort of getting red-pilled. So that's where it all started for me.
And you mentioned their safe world theory. That was one of the most interesting things I found when reading your book, because I think we've all experienced that in one way or another. What exactly is safe world theory?
So it's a concept that was introduced to me by a clinical psychologist that I used to work with on a podcast series called Before the Train Wreck. The podcast series is still on my channel. It's just terminated and changed to the Unplugged Alpha now. But what it essentially means is you build a house of cards in your head. Like, you ego invest into a story. For example, if I get involved with this woman who's got a couple of kids in tow from a prior marriage, I invest in her and her kids, treat them like my own, blah, blah, blah. Like the story that you tell yourself, everything will work out just fine. So that's a theory that's the lie basically that we tell ourselves, right? And I think a lot of guys tell themselves that lie when it comes to dealing with women, especially if they're dealing with single moms. You know, one of the things that people echo sediment so strongly on is like, you're absolutely right with everything that you say in all of these categories, especially single mom sort of thing. So you go and create this narrative, a storyline that you believe in, that you think is real, that conflicts with the real world. So it's a safe world, you know, that you create, you know, for yourself, and it becomes a theory that you hold true, which isn't true to the world. It's like a covert contract. Robert Glover, Dr. Robert Glover wrote a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and he basically talks throughout the entire book about covert contracts. Like, you create this agreement in your head that you don't share with the other person, but you hold true, and when they violate that, then you get upset. That's essentially what it means.
And it's one of those things where nowadays a lot of guys have that safe world theory when it comes to dating. And they've been sort of raised on the Hollywood Notebook movies, where if you're just a nice guy and you buy her flowers and all of this, then you'll have a happy, successful relationship and marriage. And it just doesn't end that way. And that's why I wish that I read your books a little bit sooner, because once you have your heart broken, I guess, or once you have your earth shattered by an event like that, then it can actually change you as a man. So would you say that that was the big thing that red pilled you in terms of the safe world theory?
Yeah. So all three of those ego investments that I held in marriage/divorce and business, you know, doing the right thing, and in relationships, were all in different areas of life, you know, but they're all theories that I held to be true in my head. You know, I had invested my ego into stories that I told myself that proved not to be true. So it's what it all boils down to. Like, the title of my book, of course, is The Unplugged Alpha. I know you've read it twice, which is amazing. Please leave a review. That'd be great. But the notion of unplugging is broad, like throughout the spectrum. I think that one of the things that the Manosphere, which I now call the Manoswamp, gets incredibly wrong, is it is totally focused on just women. You know, getting girls, getting a girlfriend, pickup artistry, memorizing lines, and that sort of nonsense. And it works, and you know, you can use it, but it doesn't really improve your life as a guy. If you don't get your money right, if you don't get your health right, if you don't like become a competent sort of guy in all realms of life, just focusing on like the pickup artistry aspect of life, which is what the Manoswamp is really about, doesn't really serve you. It's not going to fill your cup.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And there's actually not that many guys who I would listen to who are like self-help guys on the internet, but you are one of those. So I do appreciate it. And just in terms of things that guys do, you were a big motorbike rider for many years. Have you jumped back on the steel horse recently?
Yeah, I've ridden a few bikes in the last few years. It's like riding a bicycle. I guess you never really forget, and you never really lose that interest or passion for motorcycles. I don't have enough time, I don't think, really to own one and do the stuff that I do with supercars. Like, I'm more into exotic cars. I like intense cornering Gs now, which you can't achieve with bikes. I mean, my Porsche Turbo S pulls 1.57 Gs in a corner. If you try to do that even on a race bike with race slicks, you'll be off in the rhubarb in the gutters, and probably hurt pretty bad. So I think that my passion for speed has pivoted somewhat. I still love bikes. Like, when I get on one and I ride a friend's bike, I just think to myself, oh man, I need one of these so bad. Like, I need one of these in my life. But then I realize I don't really have room in my garage for it. When would I have time to ride it? It's, you know, it's one of those things where maybe that time for me has passed. But I have a chapter in my book and why I talk about how I think every man should own a motorcycle. Do you own a bike, or have you owned a bike before?
No, I don't own one, because I travel a lot at the moment. So I don't own one, and I haven't owned one in the past, but I've got my license, and I actually came off one the other day doing just that in Turkey. So it's a dangerous game, man. Like, I was going around a corner, and the roads in Turkey are super slippery. And as I went around, I accelerated too early, and the bike went from underneath me and carved up my whole leg. So it's a dangerous game. Another dangerous game you've been involving yourself in is boxing. Do you have an intra-club fight the other day?
I had a fight earlier this year. I think it was in April-ish. It was 3 2-minute rounds. I've been training for about 3.5, 4 years, and I was continuing to train. I said to my coach at one point, I said, "Look, should we maybe test these skills? Like have a fight." And we've done some sparring with other people. He said, "Yeah, I think you're ready." So we set up a fight. He didn't really tell me who he set it up with, but I'd committed to it, and it ended up being a guy 20 years younger than me, few inches taller, and about 35 pounds heavier. So I'll admit it, I was scared, walking into that scenario, but I had trained very hard and I came out on top. I edged him out. I think that guys need to not just get into combat sports, but also test themselves. It's like if you have a motorcycle or a fast car, I think you should test yourself. I think you should go to a racetrack and see how you do time wise. If it's a quarter mile thing, you want to see if you're faster than the other guy. Testing yourself as a guy it's a basic skill. Otherwise it's just masturbation, right? I mean, you're just practicing, and there's no point in continuing to practice something that you're not testing yourself up against. So that's why I did it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, my boxing fights, there's nothing that's ever like compared to it at all. I'm wondering, throughout your life with your motorbike riding, your business experience, has there ever been a feeling that makes you so alive as when you're walking into the boxing ring or when you're in there?
That's a great question. I said this the other day because we went for a road trip. It was me and 7 guys. Me and 7 cars, and only 5 cars came back on this road trip. So you can read between the lines and try to figure out, how that went. But, I said to the guys, I said, when we were going through some hardcore twisty stuff, we usually take a break, let the cars sort of cool down, let the brakes cool off, get out, have a drink, have a smoke, whatever it is that you need to do. And I said, you know what, guys, this is the most fun that we can have with our clothes on. Like literally everybody dies, but not everybody lives. And the way that we live and the way that we travel and the way that we do things is incredibly unique. You feel alive. And I had that same feeling when I was boxing too. But I think the thing that really lights me up the most is doing these road trips, which is why I've done 3 or 4 of them, this year, and I continue to enjoy setting them up and doing them. But a fight is amazing too, because I mean, you're putting your jaw on the line. That there's another man that's opposing you that's got his jaw on the line, and your job is to hit him hard, and ideally knock him out if you can do that. So it's very interesting. It's something that nobody told me that I would get that feeling from, that I did, and I almost immediately after I did it wanted to do it again. After I did it, I thought to myself, wow, like I fought somebody that I don't even know and I don't have a beef with. I wonder what this would be like if I could get into a ring and knock the living shit out of somebody that I actually don't like.
Maybe you should try do one of those YouTube boxing fights and get a stadium fight.
I don't really have a beef with anybody that I get into a fight with or that would be competent enough to fight me, to be honest with you, because most guys out there are not good men or even good at being men, that I have any issue with. So, I mean, I'm not going to pick on somebody weaker than me.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I find that the internet space is a weird one because I've come from definitely not the internet. My whole family is a line of builders. And then I've just happened to find my way onto YouTube. I don't even know how it happened. But loyalty is not exactly something that is a value that's held in high regard amongst YouTubers. So do you get along with other YouTubers? Do you have any other internet friends, or are you a bit of a lone wolf in that regard?
You know what, to be honest with you, I've tried over the years to form tribes and collaborate with others. And I've had their backs. Like I'm always the kind of guy where I'm the man of my word. And if I say that I'll do something and I have your back, then I'll talk shit to your face, but I'll always protect you. If somebody tries to come at you or tries to come at your back. And when I talk shit to your face, it's obviously in a jesting way, sort of like having fun with it, sort of thing. And I found that most of the men on, the content creator side of space, and it's not just YouTube, but just in general, they're self-promoters that are self-interested, that are obsessed with mostly getting girls, chasing girls, or they're not getting girls, or making money, or trying to make money. And they generally suck at all those things, while holding out that they're very good at it. So I just decided to sort of separate myself from it because, I mean, I'm not a young man anymore. You know, I'm more of a seasoned gentleman with some salt and pepper in his beard. And I think anybody that knows me, has followed me for a while or done any Googling on me, knows that I am who I say I am. I'm one of the few people that uses their real name, real first and last name out there. A lot of the guys in the Mano Swamp use avatars or made up names or pen names or whatever. So I just find that I'm more productive and I'm more efficient and I'm happier, you know, as a creator, more or less, you know, working on my own.
It's weird, man. It's a weird world. Like I'm still, it still is strange to me when I see grown men making these little videos about each other where they do these exposés. Yeah. It's bizarre to see men with,
the drama,
with a dick and balls, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like the drama, like I get the whole drama between, like, what's the upcoming fight with Dylan Dennis and Jake Paul? Like, I get what he's doing, you know, because it's a boxing match, and he's like, "Look, man, you're marrying a hoe," and you know they're throwing lawsuits at it, and you know trying to deal with it differently. But at the end of the day, it's going to draw attention to the boxing match because that's what they're trying to sell tickets for, right? So I get that. I don't understand why grown ass men behave like little girls in the Mano Swamp, always at each other with the drama and, you know, the hit pieces and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, I know a lot of these guys and I work with a lot of them, and they're not good men and they're not good at being men. Like, you wouldn't want them sat at your table with your children.
That's a good way to put it, man. And on that note, what is a good man to you? When you think about what makes a good man and what kind of person you'd want sat at the table with your daughter, what kind of a man is that?
That's a great question. So I think the author that I probably take the most cues from on this, he's a guy that I've met several times. We don't talk as often as we should, but I think he's a good guy. His name's Jack Donovan, and he wrote some books, The Way of Men, Becoming a Barbarian. He's got quite a few titles out there. He's got a great essay out there that you can read for free if you search for "I Don't Care" by Jack Donovan. He's well spoken. I think he understands masculinity. He understands the tribal nature of men. You know, he says the way of men is the way of the gang, sort of thing. And I've been very careful to create my own gang, you know, like, if you will, I guess you could call it that, but it's a community. It's mentioned very rarely on my YouTube videos and even on my website, but you can find it if you do some digging. So it's mostly found by guys that are looking for that. And I'm very careful about the guys that I let into it and I promote in the different tiers within that group. I think you have, like, there's no self-made men, I don't think, right? Like, every success has a tribe of people behind it. And in my case, I just prefer to work with men. You know, I've dealt with lots of women in my life that have been fantastic, but my preference is just to deal with men because it's a men's community. And that's who I want to support. So that's why, you know, I've done that, is to sort of create my own group. And that way I've got say over it, basically, you know, is what it boils down to, you know, at the end of the day. Because if somebody's just being a dickhead, then I can throw them out, right? If somebody's not a good fit, bye-bye, you know, sort of thing, right? So that's how I handle those things now.
And what are the qualities that you sort of look for when you're looking to somebody to enter your tribe and to enter your circle?
Well, I like weapons, and you know, I was at an entrepreneur's retreat several years ago, and the guy that was facilitating it was, you know, we were talking, and everybody had their shit that they had to deal with, right? And it's like, one thing became very clear by the end of it. Everybody sitting in that room was running a business that was doing multi-millions of dollars a year per year. They were the founder of the business, so they were the one that created it. They were the one that was a key holder, that was in charge. And all of these men were weapons, right? Not all of them saw it, but they were capable of doing fantastic things. So you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur, but you have to be somebody of some significance, putting some kind of a dent in the universe. It's not like, I don't want to surround myself with guys that are like, well, you know, how do I get a girlfriend? That's my only mission in life, sort of thing. That's entry level stuff. I don't trust men that are obsessed with getting laid, and I don't trust men that can't get laid. If you can't figure out a fundamental part of life, and it's your entire focus, then you're really not a good fit to, to be around me. I like doing cool stuff. Like, obviously, when I said, I go on a road trip with seven of my, sorry, not seven of my, but with 7 cars. I think there was about 8 or 9 of us in total, because a couple of us were moving around for cars, or had passengers. And you come back with 5. Like, there's stories there, right? Like we have a really, really good laugh. We're not driving, 15-year-old Honda Civics with fart can exhaust, making all kinds of racket. We're all driving $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 supercars, just having a great time, doing great things together, and just enjoying life. So that's just one of the outlets that we use, but it's a high level thing. Like, I like to surround myself with winners, and I'm not saying that people that aren't in there aren't or are losers, but I want everybody to eat. It's just, I don't want everybody to eat at my table, and I'm very selective about who I sit down with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, man. It kind of reminds me of the thing that you talk about in your book, where you speak about hiring slow and firing fast. It's kind of the same with friends as well, because I've got a very small circle. It's pretty much me and my 2 brothers. We work together. My little brother's an editor. I'm a presenter. My older brother builds houses, and we all work together. It's so hard to find somebody to come into that space and to actually, that you want to invest in. So, I mean, is this kind of relate? Does it kind of relate to the hire slow, fire fast thing?
Yeah, it does, because you want to take your time vetting somebody for something. Like, for example, in my community, like, buying an admission to it doesn't guarantee you a seat at my table. It guarantees you access to me and to other guys in the community, but you need to prove yourself, right? You need to demonstrate that you're worthy, that you're competent, that that you're not a simp, basically. You don't spend all your time chasing tail, or obsessed with getting tail or not getting tail, because you're an incel or something like that. Like, that's all basic stuff in life that I think guys need to figure out. But there's a table in there, and I sit at it, and there's people that sit at that table with me, and there's people that, rise to the occasion where I need to get a bigger table to seat more people at it. But again, I let people prove themselves. I let them show me who they are. And once they show me who they are, and I realize, that they're great, then they get the acknowledgement. If I realize that there are problems, or if that they're trouble, then I fire them very, very quickly. But it does take time to figure out what somebody's made of, right? And I always say, like, you should watch somebody's behavior and not listen to what they say. And that was an original line from, essentially paying attention to women, because women will say things like, oh, just be a nice guy, or, why can't you just be a shoulder to cry on, or just be yourself? But then they go off and bang Mr. Exciting sort of thing, or, the alpha Chad. So, we always used to say, pay attention to what women do, but don't listen to what they say. And I don't think that that's unique to just women. I think it's unique to human nature in general, and that you can use that with friendships. You can use that with business transactions, ventures, all kinds of stuff.
And I feel like just the idea of having a network as a guy these days is, we're losing the art of that in a sense, because when I walk around Europe, for example, I always see the old guys sitting around at the cafes at midnight, puffing cigars, drinking lattes. And then you go back to Australia, where I'm from, and my mates are, not even 30 yet, and you don't know from them anymore, because they don't have any guy friends anymore. Do you feel like we're losing that in the West a little bit?
Well, there's a number of things that contribute to that. I mean, it seems like women have invaded a lot of male spaces, and I think it's because guys let it happen. I mean, women have their spaces, let's be honest. Even the quote unquote manosphere now has been invaded by women as well, right? Like, there's female creators that are basically saying the exact same thing that men have been saying for decades. And they're becoming extremely popular because they're doing it in a dress, and they were born with a vagina. So they can get these, these women in these spaces. I mean, I could tell you right now, I could take a very average looking 5, train her on all the talking points, and have her running a YouTube channel with 5 million subs within about 1 to 2 years. Because that's how easy it is if you're a woman invading that space. So they do that, which is fine. I don't want to work in a space like that, because my understanding was it was a area for guys to sort of get together and chop up ideas and share and swap notes. But it never sort of went that way. So that happens, and men allow that to happen. I don't know the exact reason why, but if I were to point to anything, it's basically simping, if I could say anything. So that happens. There's also the general pussification of the Western male today. There's all kinds of things going on, man. There's endocrine disruptors and tap water. There's plastics, leaching estrogen mimicking chemicals into our bodies. I mean, testosterone levels are dropping in men decade over decade. Estrogen levels are rising. Men are becoming more agreeable. They're becoming softer. They're becoming weaker. We see that with voting patterns. We see the destruction of the fabric of the family unit. Family units don't really matter anymore. They tell women, you go girl, climb the corporate ladder. You don't need no man. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. You get these guys that are like male feminists, which are really just dorky losers that are just trying to placate to women to get in their pants, which never works. These women want nothing to do with these guys. So you have this shift happening in society and culture, which makes it difficult for unique, strong, masculine male spaces to operate, right? If you spend any time watching, like, even films, like gang movies, Goodfellas, Casino, stuff like that, there's no women involved in any of these men's spaces. It's all run by men. And typically, traditionally, that's where it's been run in the past. They're reasonably accurate. Again, it's Hollywood, so it's acted up a little bit. But when you actually study these mafia bosses and things like this, you realize that male spaces are unique to men, and to perpetuate strong masculinity, men need to sort of work together and form. Again, the way of men is the way of the gang, sort of thing. Like, they have to form some sort of a tribe or a gang, and it's no surprise that government wants to dismantle male only spaces, like, even like mafia sort of structures. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's interesting that there's almost no encourage, like, even the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts used to be for boys only. Now girls are allowed to sign up for Boy Scouts, sort of thing. And this is not new. I mean, this happened about a decade ago. So it's just
we barely even know what a boy is anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the other problem too. Today is that I think traditionally in the past, if you were to survey the population about 100 years ago, you'd find that less than 2% would identify with gay, trans, lesbian, like the LGBT, like the alphabet soup sort of crowd. Whereas today, when they survey young adults under 35, I believe something like a third of them identify with the alphabet soup sort of crowd, like the pronoun sort of crowd, which isn't because they are that when they were born. It's just that that's where they think that they should fit, because that's what society keeps telling them. Be inclusive, be progressive. You don't want to be a boy, you can be a girl. It's like, kids are getting this messaging in many Western schools today, and it's no surprise that we have a weak, soft culture with low birth rates that we have.
Yeah. And then I feel like another part of it is that it's this whole toxic masculinity narrative these days, because I feel like women used to know that men needed their spaces. Like, even when I speak to my mum about it, she's a bit older, Italian, a bit more based. And she'll kick her partner out of the door and say, go hang out with the guys, because they kind of knew that men need that space. They need to chop it up a little bit. But now anytime men want to hang out together and have men's spaces and have a bit of locker room talk and a bit of banter, all of a sudden it's toxic masculinity. And there's these adverts where guys are saying, hey, mates, stop doing that. Like, fuck off. Like, just let us have our spaces. I get sometimes, and I'm pretty PG with this stuff, but sometimes I get women who will message me on Instagram or email these really sort of upset messages saying, I can't believe that you said this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, it's not meant for you. I was speaking to guys. Like, I wouldn't come and tell you, I can't believe you watched Oprah, because, I wouldn't do that. I just let you have your girl space, let you listen to your WAP and your Cardi B, and you let me do my thing. So I don't know. Do you reckon that it's a little bit of the fact that women don't really get men as much these days and what we actually need?
Very few women understand males and what. See, there's a big difference between males and men, right? Like, there's a lot of males out there. There's not a lot of men out there, right? And again, that's because men are letting women invade their spaces. That's because we're listening to females that are in positions of power now, saying some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, the phrase toxic masculinity. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's just masculinity. It's only called toxic when it doesn't serve you, or if it's not doing something that you want it to do. When there's a war, when there's a flood, when there's a fucking hurricane that flattens an entire state, and men are needed to go in and rescue with helicopters and fire trucks and boats, and there's women and children that are dying or getting hurt. That's when masculinity is appreciated, right? But they don't call it toxic masculinity then. That's still conventionally masculine. It's only called toxic masculinity when they can't control you, right? If you see a guy out on the street and he's wearing a MAGA hat or something to that effect, oh, he's toxically masculine. Is he though? Or does he just have an opinion that's different from yours? The funny thing about people and their opinions is they don't really want to hear your opinion. They seem to want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. And that's what this crowd of folks are, I believe anyway, that generally point and sputter at conventionally masculine men, calling them toxically masculine. That's all they are. They're just envious, and essentially they want to be with a guy like that, but they probably can't, just because of the nature of their lives, and they're not being chosen, right? You see a lot of these women on apps like TikTok, and they're like, I'm a conventionally liberal woman, and all I keep finding with guys that I like is that they're all conservative or they're Republican. Why can't I find a good liberal guy that is also good looking?
By definition,
that's what do you want, sweetheart? Right? Do you want a Ferrari that also gets 100 miles to the gallon? Because they don't exist. Like pick, choose what you want.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the same with male feminists as well. Male feminists, they're doing what they can to compete in the masculine hierarchy. Have you ever heard of the term sneaky fucker syndrome?
Yeah, that's basically what male feminists are. They're sneaky fuckers.
Yeah, exactly. So just for those of you who are listening, it's a zoology term whereby there's a certain few animals where the alpha males will obviously dominate the herd or the harem or whatever. And then the beta males will come in and they'll disguise themselves as women so that they can get past the alpha males and then go and try and breed with the ladies. So I think we see that. And I think Gad Saad talks about this. Have you read much of Gad Saad's work?
Parasitic Mind or Parasite Mind, I think was the last one that I, listened to. But if you watch any kind of nature show, I was watching one the other day on Netflix called Predators. And you see that behavior, with with certain prides of lions too, right? Happens in the primate, communities as well. So, it's no surprise that you get these male feminists that are essentially your sneaky fuckers of the animal kingdom.
Yeah, it's a thing. And another thing when it comes to how old are you now, Rich, if you don't mind me asking?
I was born in the 70s. I never give my exact age out because there's too many weirdos out there.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So, you are in good shape. You've just had a boxing fight. You're still cruising around. You're still mentally switched on. And I think a lot of this has to do with what you do with your endocrine system. And I find it really interesting. And when I'm a little bit older, I think I'll definitely be doing this when my testosterone levels start to drop as well. So for anybody who's listening out there who might feel like their energy is dropping or their testosterone's dropping and they want to address it and address the endocrine system, what would be your advice?
So there's a chapter in my book on this, and in the updated second edition is going to have even more information, which will be out soon. But essentially, my recommendation is to track your blood labs on an annual basis from about the age of 25 up. 30 should be the latest. I think anyway, because it's usually by the age of 30 that testosterone levels start to drop in men. And it's gradual. It's not immediate. Like when women hit menopause, they hit this wall. Their hormone panel changes completely. They stop dropping eggs. They basically age very rapidly, from that point onward. Collagen in their skin, diminishes drastically. So for men, it's not as obvious as that, right? It's a slow progressive drop in your testosterone levels, like 1 to 3% per year. So if you're tracking it, then you should have some awareness after 4 or 5 years of tracking this that, okay, well, it looks like my testosterone levels are dropping. You can try to optimize it naturally. There's lots of advice that I have in my videos and even in my book that I talk about there. If that doesn't work, then you can optimize it with testosterone therapy. There's doctors that prescribe testosterone. You can inject that. There's pellet formats, there's lozenges, there's all kinds of ways that you can administer it. It's very safe, it's very effective, it's efficient. Andrew Huberman, who's a podcaster, he's basically a scientist that talks a lot about things like sleep and eyesight and all kinds of different things. And he's done many podcasts on testosterone, and I think he said it best when he said that testosterone makes effort feel good. So if you've got healthy levels of optimized testosterone in your body, effort feels good. Doing things feel good. Competing feels good. It feels very natural. And, when you get your levels optimized, your life is just better. You perform better, you sleep better, you bang better, you're stronger, you're more competent, you're more aggressive. I found anyway, with me that when I got my levels optimized and I got them to levels that really worked for me, it actually calmed me and it focused me more. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Like they say, oh, testosterone will make your balls shrink. You'll go blind. You'll go bald. You'll blah, 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 and all these things. And it's like, look, man, or you got prostate cancer or you'll have heart attacks or whatever. And I've looked into all of those things and they're not true. Testosterone improves heart health. It doesn't do anything to affect prostate cancer. If you're going bald, it's genetic. It's got nothing to do with testosterone levels. There's loads of bodybuilders out there that have levels 100 times higher than me that have a better head of hair because it's genetic, right? And so it's like, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And there's also a lot of pointing and sputtering from woke culture, basically telling men to be softer, because if you have high testosterone, you're toxically masculine, right? So you get these dorks and these nerds that of course are like, oh, you're just a steroid head or juice head or something like that. It's like, say whatever you want, man, but I wouldn't trade my life for yours. So have fun being poor, dumb, and a loser, not having no involved women in your life, sort of thing. So it's like, you always have to consider the source when you get the criticism, because hate only ever comes from beneath you.
Yeah. And I'm a big proponent of this stuff. And I was even speaking to a family friend about it the other week. And I was saying, you should really get your levels checked. I mean, if you're struggling with your energy and if if you can't lose any weight and you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning and you feel like your age is getting to you so much, like there are guys out there who are moving around like they're in their 30s and they're in their 60s. And it's doable these days with modern day science and technology. Your body can be like a machine. If you pay enough attention to it, then you can be moving around like you're in your 30s. And I guess you just have to find a good doctor.
Yeah, and that's one of the first steps. Is most family doctors are just lazy, right? They're out of shape, incompetent quacks that haven't kept up on what works and what doesn't work, right? They're just these beta dorks that sort of toe the line. So if you go into a family doctor's office, you say, I want to pull a full blood panel. I want to know my cholesterol, my testosterone, my estrogen, and all that sort of stuff. The first obstacle that you'll get is a lot of doctors will say, well, you don't need to test that because you're 30, Now, if you can get past that and they agree to run that test, I don't know if where you live, the government pays for it or if it's an out-of-pocket expense. If it's an out-of-pocket expense, pay for it. It's not expensive. But even if you get it back, it's like the whole, where you have a classroom of grade 3s that aren't tall enough to dunk the basketball. What they do is they lower the basketball net so they can get it through the hoop. That's basically what they've done with the guidelines, right? Like the state guidelines have lowered what optimal testosterone looks like to basically lower the basketball hoop so you can dunk it if you're 30, sort of thing. So You might get it back and it'll be quote unquote in range, but in range is not optimal, right? We know that men had much higher testosterone levels thousands of years ago. Again, we weren't sitting in front of computers and screens and had endocrine disruptors and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and cell towers and all of these things and estrogen and tap water. We had none of those things back then, right? So we were moving, we were chasing animals, hunting and gathering, and doing something with our lives, and being out in sunshine and getting vitamin D. And we can see from the skeletons of male subjects, they had a more chiseled, angled jawline, which is what you get when you have high T. One of the other things too is if you're a teen in your developing years, your ring finger, this one here, is supposed to be longer than your index finger if you've got optimal T levels. So they found lots of skeletons back then where they can prove that testosterone levels were higher back in the day than what they are today. So for a doctor to look at it, or sorry, for a doctor to be willing to run the test, and if they do run the test and they come back, they'll probably just say, well, it's in range. In range, again, is not optimal. So even if they say it's in range, then you feel like it's too low, or you're suffering from some of the signs and signals of low T, which would include not waking up with morning wood, poor performance sexually, loss of muscle mass, the gain of body fat, bone deterioration, right? Like one of the things that happens when you administer T is your bone density goes up as well too. So, if you're starting to see signs of low T, even if it comes back in range and you're trying to do things to optimize it over the next couple of years and it doesn't, I mean, if you try that and by the age of 35, 40, it looks like you need to get testosterone therapy, get it. I mean, do the work to find a source that can provide that to you if you can't, build it up out of your body naturally. I always tell guys to do it naturally first. Your balls make the best testosterone in the world. If you can't optimize that, I started when I was about 43. So had I known what I know now back at 43, I don't know that I would have gone the TRT route back then. I would have probably tried a few more things to try to optimize it. There's a lot of studies and a lot of things that I've come across since then, which are newer, which I didn't know about back when I was younger. So try to do it naturally first. And if you can't, that's fine. There's pharma, which can assist you. The only thing I don't like about assistance from pharma is you kind of rely on big pharma to optimize your health. And if they want to cut you off, what do? You got to find an alternate source. Sure, there's a black market, there's underground, that'll always exist. So make sure you have contacts there if that's something that you want to prepare for. But that's the only downside to it, really.
Yeah, facts. And I feel like these things, like we've sort of touched on a few times in this conversation, is these things are demonized these days. In any way that men want to get better, it's shamed. Yeah. And it's disappointing to see because there are a lot of young guys out there who are totally and utterly lost in the world. And I have them come and reach out to me. And I'm like, man, I'm 27. I'm really figuring shit out. Go and read Rich's book. To be honest, I got my brother onto your book as well. And he was just like, I can't believe, because my brother's a bit more naturally sort of alpha, my older brother. And he was like, I can't believe there are other people who think like me. But for me, it was a bit more like it was an unplugging for me, because I'm probably a little bit more, I had to go through that phase and go through that loss of the safe world theory. So there are a lot of young guys out there who are coming even to me and to guys like yourself and the internet and seeking advice, because obviously their fathers are too much of a pussy to give them proper advice about how to be a man, or they don't have fathers, or they've just been so indoctrinated by feminism and by Hollywood and by woke culture. So in terms of young guys, and I'm talking anywhere from 15 to 25, 30 even, where do they start?
Well, I mean, a good start is by reading my book. It's kind of a pathway to unplugging, generally speaking. But it boils down to this, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's essentially what I had done, a lot of my life is I had done what they in quotations had told me to do. Culture, Hollywood, religion, family, society, government, school, all that stuff. I listened to what they said and I believed it. And then I did what they said to do. And some of it works, some of it doesn't work, right? a lot of the stuff with attraction and keeping women around that you hear your entire life, like just be a nice guy, sort of thing. That shit doesn't work. You'll get walked on by women, walked all over, sorry, by women. Leading a relationship is something that men need to do, right? And we've been told by society, culture, and toxic feminism and all this stuff that men and women are equal. And one of the things that I talk about often when people call in on my podcast shows is they'll often say like the word partner, and that word irritates me to no end, because I don't know, like, are you a partner in a law firm? Are you in a lesbian relationship, same sex? I can't tell. Why can't we use the conventional words that we've always used, like husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, like whatever that happens to be, right? But we tend to try to like neuter and neutralize language. And I think the first step in unplugging is seeing all the bullshit out there. And then, the other step, obviously, that comes with it in parallel, is seeing your own bullshit. And once you can see, the lies versus the truth, then things become more clear. I mean, one of the things that a lot of guys say to me once they sort of kind of go through the unplugging process is they're like, I can't listen to music the same way that I used to, because it's all trying to plug me back into like the Matrix or whatever it is that you want to call it. It's trying to plug me back into the lies, right? Oh, pine for her, cry for her, put her up on a pedestal, write her poems and love stories and all this kind of shit. And it's like, yeah, that might work on some women some of the time for a short period of time, but that's not what keeps women around over a long-term basis. That's not what keeps them obsessed with you.
Yeah, I mean, call me a hopeless romantic, Rich, but I still believe in love. And I still believe that you can have like that loving relationship with a woman. And I find that when I'm in Eastern Europe, for example, like I was dating this Ukrainian girl recently, and I've sort of conditioned myself to not show overt signs of affection, because, in Australia, women will they'll shit on you for that. And they'll say, oh, it's an ick. But if you show signs of affection and romanticism towards women over here, they love it. And they actually genuinely appreciate it. And they make you feel like a man because of it. So I think that there is still hope for that. And I wonder what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been with my girlfriend for years now, and I genuinely love her and she genuinely loves me, sort of thing. So it's not that I don't believe in love. It's just there's elements of relationships that society and culture tries to press on us that I won't yield to. For example, people often ask me, Rich, would you ever get married again? And the answer is always no. Like, I don't see any upside to it. It's got nothing to do with love, right? Like, marriage itself as a concept, as long as it's been around, which is a very long time now. There's a book called A History of Marriage. The author's name is Stephanie Kuntz. If anybody's interested, read it. But the point of marriage was the acquisition of in-laws, right? So I would blend my family with your family, and we would become a bigger, stronger tribe, right? Because we didn't have like a military border defense. We didn't have healthcare. We didn't have schooling. We didn't have care for the elderly. It was like the blending of the families that would sort of take care of those things, right? So the acquisition of in-laws was important after agriculture. I don't think that marriage has any upside for men today whatsoever. In fact, it's mostly downside. So do I believe in love? Sure. Am I in love? Yeah. Do I think that I should get married, or if somebody tried to pressure me? Like, if my girlfriend said to me, look, if, like shit or get off the pot, like get married or I'm out, I'd be like, well, I guess, don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. It's, it's been a good time and I'll be sad for a few days, but that's fine. I can easily replace, because I have a mindset of abundance. I like, that's where I've gotten to, sort of thing. So I don't ever tell guys not to love or to be intimate with women or to be open or express certain things. But it's like, for most guys, it's whoa, slow down, turn off the afterburners. Like, I had this guy that emailed me last night, and I read his email on my podcast, and he's been with this girl for 3 months. He feels like she's the one, she's special. Everything feels right and perfect with her. And he's
Logan
like,
Paul.
how do I not screw this up? Right. It's like, dude, slow the fuck down, first of all, because you're putting her up on a pedestal like she's the only thing in the world that should exist for you. And that, right, like the ick, sort of thing that you hear women talking about, that will turn her off if you're all over her like a fat kid on cake, for the next 3 months after that as well. So it's like, sure, love a woman, but express it in such a way where it's not over the top. She should be, for every time that you say I love you or you express gestures of interest or intimacy, because men are the true romantics. Like, the way that you put that is absolutely correct. But she should probably, for every time that you say it 2 times, or at least once, sort of thing. You don't want a love bomber. You want, basically, the way that I sum it up is, you want to choose women that choose you, right? You don't want to have to fight for her. You don't want to have to, compete with that guy over there and this guy over there and like fight with them over her attention, sort of thing. Generally speaking, you want to date women, multiple women simultaneously, let the cream rise to the top. The ones that are ill, that aren't good long-term prospects, that can't deal with a strong, virtuous alpha type of guy, they'll sort of fall off. Eventually, women will start saying things to you like, Jake, I really dig your vibe. I don't want to share you. I'm not seeing anybody else right now. Like, where do we stand? I want to build a future with you, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of gal that you want to choose. That's when she should start hearing things like, well, I love you too, sort of thing. But most guys rush into it real early in the first few months. And they're like, I love you, will you be my girlfriend, sort of thing. And it's like, okay, that might go well for a little bit, but if you keep up in that direction with that attitude, we've all seen that move before and we know how that ends.
Facts, man. And that's only going to get worse, unfortunately. And I know your attitude towards this is sort of that you're just watching back and laughing as it all happens before your eyes. And I get that, because I'm overseas and I'm enjoying life in different parts of Europe and would not even think about dating an Australian girl. But I've still got that part of me that wants to fight for the West, even though it might be too far gone. And I've got that part of me that wants to just embrace the ideas of Christianity and the nuclear family and wants to embody what I want to see in the world. But when you're watching a train wreck happen before your eyes, sometimes I feel like there's no point standing in front of the train going, no, I'll stop you. There's not much you can do about it.
That's a great analogy, because that's essentially what you're up against. You're trying to stop a freight train with 100 cars behind it and 3 locomotive engines pushing it through with just your hands stopping it on the tracks. That's the size of the problem that we're up against. Sure, I'd love to see the return of the nuclear family, femininity, masculinity, conventional femininity, women being a complement to a man's life, a man providing, a man having, authority over his household, with the responsibility to it. The conventional things that made my grandfather, my great grandfathers, down, through those paths that, allowed me to exist today. But I don't think that we're going to return to that time anytime soon. There's a cultural shift that's, again, it's trying to pussify and weaken and soften the Western male. It's trying to tell women to become more like men. Again, put off having families, put off having children, go climb the corporate ladder, get degrees, frame them in mahogany, put them on the wall, get promoted. I mean, it's why we have so many single childless women now in their late 30s, desperate with baby rabies to have children on dating apps after they've been run through by 50 to 100 guys trying to hold out purity and, getting right with God and wanting to get married. I mean, one of the big problems that I see with religion today, and like the original rule book does have great points, right? If you follow the original rule book, I think that it's a good set of guidelines. The problem is today is that most churches and most religions are basically beta factories, right? You see it all the time in these men's discussion groups. Like, I'm in a few of them on Facebook, and you'll get some dork that's like, my wife hasn't slept with me in, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, blah, blah, blah. And I want to be intimate with her. And, she says, do more chores or some guys will chime in and be like, well, what's her love language, sort of thing, because my wife's love language is this. And if you read this love language book, then you can also get, basic starfish missionary sex like I do, once every month as well. And it's like, losers, right? Like, these guys are not living their best life. And to some degree, it's not really their fault. They've been programmed with a sequence of lies and bullshit that they've consumed, and they're drunk on this Kool-Aid, and they're living this narrative of things like chore play. Like, if I just change enough diapers and iron enough shirts and do the laundry and cut the grass and swap the snow tires for the summer tires, she'll eventually bang me, enthusiastically. And that's not the way it works. It's never worked that way. And these guys inherently know this. Like, they know if they go back in their minds to where they first met their wife before they got married, before they were engaged, when they had enthusiastic, rough monkey sex in the back seat of their parents' car in a parking lot somewhere, they know what genuine desire looks like. But through a process of betatization, through 1,000 concessions, which usually starts with something like, don't brush your teeth over there, you're going to get it on the carpet, put the black socks in the black hamper and the white socks in the white hamper. Like, they go through this sequence of yes, 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 honey, to everything. And they don't have a backbone, and they don't know how to lead, and they don't know how to set the tone, and they don't know how to say no, that they end up in a point where they're on a men's, discussion board talking about God, Jesus, and doing more chore play just to get some pathetic starfish sex once every 6 months, right? So I know that's a bit of a rant, but I don't see culture shifting in a large enough degree where there's ever going to be a return to the conventional norms that we operated in for millions of years. I think this shift in the last, it's probably since, I'd say, the 60s, 70s, like since hormonal birth control, since that shift, that things have just been on the decline, progressively.
And I feel like it's what you say about betatization through 1,000 concessions, like what you just said, all of the little concessions that you constantly give away. I feel like on the micro level, that's true. But then on the macro level, that's also true in terms of society and the way that men have danced around these issues over the last 60 years or whatever. And we don't have a collective backbone anymore either. And then every time somebody tries to stand up and say, hey, I'm going to cut them down and basically shit on them. So I think you and I would both be happy to see the return of, nuclear family and values. And, maybe it does turn around. I'm still somewhat hopeful, but it's not looking great.
The good news is that is what is attractive still to women. The good news is that strong, virtuous, alpha type of men are what women are authentically attracted to. And your competition has never been lower than ever. Like, all that my great grandfather needed to do was basically go and fight in a war, probably, and come back and get a job. And that job was enough, to provide for a family, have a house, have a stay-at-home wife, a bunch of kids, everything taken care of. For today's modern women, that's not even close to enough anymore. You've got to be over 6'2". You've got to make $250,000 a year. You got to drive a really nice car. You got to, they've got this long laundry list: humble, nice, funny, sweet, alpha, beta, da 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 da. It's like it keeps going and going and going and going, sort of thing. And it's like, and what do most women bring to the table? Usually like a body count of 50, and they're selling purity, and they want to be a wife, right? Many cases they're bringing some other dude's kids, sometimes from multiple fathers, right? Like today's modern women, generally speaking, and you sort of alluded to this, mentioning that you rarely date women from Australia. And I get it, because women in Eastern Europe are far more feminine. They're more conventional. They're more conservative. They're more willing to enter the frame of a strong masculine man. So there is some beacon of hope. That's why I'm more, along the lines of just enjoy the decline. Look at the game, understand the rules, play within it, and optimize yourself as best as you can. Because you can still have a great life as a guy today. You can still, if you want to have children, you can still do that. If you want to have a girlfriend, if you want to, take on the risk of marriage, you can do all of those things if you like. And if you do it right, and you're a strong enough guy that's done the work on themselves, you'll stand out from the crowd easily, very, very easily, because the competition has never been weaker than what it is today.
Oh, man, 100%. Couldn't have said it better. Rich, I'm going to let you go because you are a busy man and I appreciate your time today. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is probably just my website, and that's just richcooper.ca. And that'll take you to my social media, my YouTube, my book, community, all that stuff.
Beautiful. Well, mate, thank you once again.
Thanks, man.